A 26-year-old woman walks into a café carrying the weight of 2 years' worth of judgment, a diaper bag packed with military precision, and a secret that could destroy the only chance at love she's had in years. Across the room, a widowed father of one sits waiting, his coffee growing cold, his heart braced for disappointment. What happens in the next 60 seconds will either confirm every cruel assumption she's learned to expect, or it will shatter everything she thought she knew about being seen. The door of the wandering mug opened with a soft chime that felt deafening in Nyla Reed's ears. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she scanned the small cafe, her grip tightening on Celine's warm body pressed against her hip. There, by the window, a black man with dark hair and tired eyes that reminded her of her own reflection. He was already looking at her, his expression shifting from polite anticipation to visible confusion as his gaze dropped to the toddler on her hip. Here we go, Nyla thought, forcing her feet to move forward. Let the judgment begin. She had dressed carefully that morning, a red dress that she'd ironed twice, her natural hair styled in elegant twists. Celine had fought her through diaper changes and shoe negotiations, and now clung to her mother's neck with the possessive grip of a koala. Jackson Hale stood as she approached, nearly knocking his knee against the table, his coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim of his cup. "Jackson." Nyla's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Nyla." He caught himself. "Yes. Hi. Hello?" The man was nervous. That was unexpected. Celine lifted her head from Nyla's shoulder, fixing Jackson with the kind of frank, unblinking stare that only toddlers and particularly judgmental house cats could achieve. One chubby finger found its way into her mouth as she studied him with the intensity of a scientist examining a particularly interesting specimen. Nyla took a breath. This was the moment where he would make an excuse about forgetting something in his car, or suddenly remember an urgent work emergency, or simply stand up and walk away like the man 3 months ago who had looked at Celine and said, "I'm not looking to raise someone else's mistake." The memory of that night, crying in her car for an hour, Celine sleeping peacefully in her car seat, blissfully unaware that she'd just been called a mistake, strengthened Nyla's resolve. "This is Celine," she said, the words coming out in a rush. "My daughter. I know I probably should have mentioned her before, but I wanted you to see the full picture before you decided if you wanted to run. Most people do run. And I completely understand if you want to. I'm tired of pretending to be something I'm not. I'm a package deal. This is the package. If that's not what you're looking for, I won't be offended." She paused, slightly breathless. "Well, I might be a little offended, but I'll get over it." The silence felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. Nyla watched Jackson's face, trying to read the micro-expressions that flickered across his deep brown skin. Surprise, confusion, something that might have been recognition. "Would you like to sit down?" he asked finally, gesturing to the chair across from him. Nyla blinked. "What?" "Sit down, unless you'd prefer to stand. But the chairs here are actually pretty comfortable, or so I've heard. I've only been sitting in mine for about 15 minutes, but so far, no complaints." A small, uncertain smile tugged at Nyla's lips. You're not going to leave?" "Why would I leave?" "Because I brought a toddler to a blind date. Most people consider that a deal breaker." Jackson shrugged, and there was something in his eyes, a weariness that matched her own. "I have a 5-year-old at home. If anything, this just means you understand that babysitters are expensive and unreliable." Nyla sat down slowly, her legs suddenly unsteady. She adjusted Celine on her lap, and the little girl immediately began a tactile investigation of the table's surface, her small hands patting the wood with scientific curiosity. "You have a daughter?" "Briar. She's home with my mom right now, probably convincing her that ice cream counts as a vegetable because it has vanilla beans in it." For the first time since walking through that door, Nyla laughed. A real laugh, startled out of her like a bird started from a tree. "Mama," Celine announced, tugging at Nyla's sleeve with the imperious authority of a tiny dictator. "Hungry? I know, baby. Give me just a what is she like?" Jackson interrupted, already flagging down a server, a teenage girl with blue-streaked hair and an eyebrow piercing. "They have these little fruit cups here and some kind of cheese crackers that Briar always demands when we come." Nyla stared at him as if he had just offered to solve world hunger. Her mouth opened, then closed. She likes cheese and bananas. Perfect. Jackson smiled at the server, and Nyla noticed the way it transformed his face, softening the tired lines around his eyes. "Could we get a fruit cup? Some cheese crackers?" And he glanced at Nyla. "What would you like?" "A latte, please." When the server left, silence settled between them, not uncomfortable exactly, but weighted with the strangeness of the situation. Nyla watched Jackson watching Celine, who had discovered a fascinating spot on the table and was now tapping it rhythmically with one finger. Tap, tap, tap. Celine narrated her actions with the seriousness of a documentary filmmaker. "That's a very good tap," Jackson told her solemnly. Celine beamed at him, revealing 4 tiny teeth. When the food arrived, Celine's eyes widened with the kind of pure joy that only small children experiencing the appearance of snacks could achieve. She reached for the fruit cup with both hands, her coordination still imperfect at 2 years old. Pieces of banana and strawberry threatened to become casualties of her enthusiasm. "Here! Let me Nyla started." But Jackson was already moving. "May I?" he asked, and the question was so gentle, so respectful that Nyla could only nod. She watched, frozen, as Jackson Hale, a man she had known for approximately 12 minutes, reached across the table and gently lifted Celine from her lap. He settled the toddler against his chest with the practiced ease of someone who had done this thousands of times, one arm supporting her back while his free hand held the fruit cup steady. Celine didn't protest. She simply settled against him as if she'd known him forever, her small body relaxing into his hold. "Nana," Celine said approvingly, around a mouthful of banana that Jackson had just guided to her eager mouth. "Good Nana?" Jackson asked her seriously, as if her opinion on the banana quality was of utmost importance. "Good Nana more. What's the magic word?" Celine considered this with the gravity of a philosopher contemplating the meaning of existence, her face scrunched up in concentration. "Peas." Close enough. Nyla had gone completely still across the table, her latte arriving and sitting untouched as she watched the scene unfold. Something was happening in her chest, a cracking sensation like ice breaking up after a long winter. When Jackson looked up and caught her staring, he must have seen something in her face because his expression shifted to concern. "Is this okay? I didn't mean to just no one's ever." Nyla's voice broke. She pressed her fingers to her eyes, trying to stop the tears that were threatening to fall. I'm sorry. It's just no one's ever done that before." "Done what?" "Treated her like—" She gestured helplessly at the scene before her. This stranger feeding her daughter fruit with the patience of a saint, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, like she's just a person. Not a problem to be solved or a red flag to run from, just a person who likes bananas. "More, Nana," Celine demanded, oblivious to the emotional moment happening around her. "See?" Jackson said softly, offering Celine another piece of fruit. "She knows what she wants. That's admirable. Honestly, half the adults I know don't have that kind of clarity." Nyla laughed again, the sound wet with tears she was still trying to suppress. She finally picked up her latte, wrapping both hands around it, as if it could anchor her to this moment, this impossible, unexpected moment where someone was being kind to her daughter without expecting anything in return. "You're very strange, Jackson Hale," she said. "I've been told, usually less kindly." Nyla had spent 2 years building walls around herself and Celine, expecting rejection so she could brace for it. But here was a man who had just accepted them, both of them, without hesitation. It was terrifying. They talked, and the conversation flowed with an ease that surprised them both. Jackson told her about Briar, how she had her mother's brown curls and a stubborn streak that could move mountains. She asked, "Me the other day why the moon follows our car?" he said, a smile playing at his lips. "And when I tried to explain about the moon staying in one place while we move, she said, 'Daddy, that's silly. The moon clearly likes our car.'" Nyla laughed. "How do you argue with that logic?" "You don't. I've learned that 5-year-olds are basically tiny lawyers. They'll find loopholes in everything." As they talked, Nyla found herself studying Jackson's face, the lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and grief, the way his expression softened when he talked about his daughter, the gentleness in his hands as he kept Celine entertained with small pieces of fruit. "Can I ask?" Nyla hesitated, then pushed forward. "Briar's mother?" Jackson's expression shifted, and Nyla immediately regretted asking. But he didn't shut down. Instead, he looked out the window at the mountains visible in the distance, his hand still absently rubbing Celine's back. "Celine," he said quietly. "She died 3 years ago. Heart condition no one knew about. She was laughing at something Briar said. Briar was trying to say spaghetti, and it kept coming out as passetti, and then she just collapsed. By the time the ambulance got there, she was gone." "Nyla, you don't have to say sorry," he interrupted gently. "Everyone says sorry, and I appreciate it, but mostly I miss her every day, and I'm terrified I'm going to mess up Briar because I'm doing this alone." The honesty in his words struck Nyla like a physical blow. She understood that fear, the bone-deep terror of failing the small person who depended on you completely. "I'm sure you're doing great," she said, meaning it. "Some days I'm not sure about anything." He shifted Celine slightly as she started to drowse against his shoulder, her small fist clutching a handful of his shirt. "I tried to date twice. It went about as well as you'd expect. One woman left mid-dinner and never came back. The other spent the entire evening talking about cryptocurrency and didn't ask about Briar once." "People are the worst," Nyla said with feeling. "Not all people." Jackson looked at her meaningfully. "Some people walk into cafes with toddlers on their hips and give strangers a second chance." Nyla felt heat rise to her cheeks. She busied herself with her latte, which had grown lukewarm. "My turn for an invasive question," Jackson said. "Celine's father." And there it was, the question she had been dreading and expecting in equal measure. Nyla's hands tightened around her cup. "Not in the picture," she said, which was technically true if you stretched the definition of truth until it screamed. "It's just been the two of us since she was born." Another truth that was also a lie. The cognitive dissonance of it made her stomach hurt. Jackson nodded, accepting this without pushing for more details. That must be hard. Some days more than others. Nyla looked down at Celine, who had fallen asleep against Jackson's shoulder, her tiny chest rising and falling with each peaceful breath. But she's worth it. Every sleepless night, every judgmental look in the grocery store, every date that ends with someone calling her a mistake, she's worth all of it. Anyone who calls her a mistake is an idiot. The fierceness in Jackson's voice surprised her. He was looking at Celine with something like protectiveness, and they'd only just met. It made Nyla's throat tight. "Thank you," she whispered. They stayed at the café for 2 hours. The conversation wandered through safer topics, favorite books, childhood memories, and the unique challenges of single parenthood. "Nobody tells you about the laundry," Jackson said with mock seriousness. "How does one small human generate so much laundry? I swear Briar goes through 3 outfit changes a day just for the drama of it. Celine has started having opinions about her socks. Apparently some socks are too scratchy and must be removed immediately with prejudice. The sock rebellion, a classic." By the time they left the cafe, the sun was beginning to set over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Jackson carefully transferred the sleeping Celine back into Nyla's arms, and the toddler stirred slightly, mumbling something that sounded like Nana before settling against her mother's shoulder. "I had a really good time," Nyla said, surprised by how much she meant it. For the first time in 2 years, a date hadn't felt like a gauntlet to survive. It had felt like possibility. Me too. Jackson's hands were in his pockets, and he looked almost shy. "Can I see you again? Both of you?" Nyla hesitated. There was still so much he didn't know. Things she had buried so deep she sometimes forgot they existed. Secrets that felt like stones in her chest, getting heavier with each day that passed. But for the first time in 2 years, she felt something that might have been hope. "Yes," she said, "I'd like that." The weeks turned into months, and what had started as careful, tentative dates evolved into something that felt like family. Nyla found herself at Jackson's house 3 or 4 times a week. Sometimes they'd cook dinner together while the girls played, while Briar orchestrated elaborate games and Celine enthusiastically destroyed whatever Briar had just built. Other times they'd sit on the back porch after bedtime, talking about everything and nothing while the night sounds of Asheville hummed around them. "Briar asked me today if you were going to be her new mama," Jackson said one evening, his voice careful. Nyla's heart stuttered. "What did you tell her?" "I told her that I cared about you very much, and that these things take time, that we're figuring it out as we go." He turned to look at her, and in the dim porch light, his eyes were serious. "But between you and me, I'm falling in love with you, Nyla Reed. Both of you, and that terrifies me, because I've lost people I loved before, and I don't know if I'm brave enough to risk that kind of pain again. Jackson, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted gently. "I just needed you to know where I stand, where my heart is." But Nyla did have something to say. Words that had been building in her chest for weeks, pressing against her ribs like birds trying to escape. "I'm falling in love with you too," she whispered, "and it terrifies me even more because there are things you don't know. Things about me and Celine that a cry from inside interrupted her. Celine's distinctive wail followed by Briar's voice trying to soothe. "It's okay, Celine. The monster under the bed isn't real. I checked." They both rushed inside to find Celine sitting up in the guest bed where she'd been napping, tears streaming down her face, while Briar patted her arm with the awkward comfort of a 5-year-old who had appointed herself as guardian. "Bad dream," Briar explained. "I have them sometimes too, about the dark." Nyla scooped Celine up, holding her close. "You're okay, baby. Mama's here." "Mama." Celine hiccuped into her shoulder, scared. "I know, sweet girl, but you're safe. You're always safe with Mama." Briar climbed onto the bed, sitting cross-legged with the posture of someone preparing to deliver important information. "When I have bad dreams, Daddy sings me the moon song. Do you want to hear it, Celine?" Celine nodded, still sniffling. And so, Briar sang in a high, slightly off-key voice that was nonetheless beautiful. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine. You make me happy." Jackson joined in, his deeper voice harmonizing with his daughter's. By the second verse, even Celine was humming along, her tears drying on her cheeks. Watching them, this man and his daughter including her child in their ritual, making space for her in their grief, in their healing, Nyla felt her walls finally completely crumble. She was in love, deeply, terrifyingly in love, and she had no idea how to tell Jackson the truth. The girls' bond deepened with each passing day. Briar appointed herself as Celine's protector and teacher, a role she took with the utmost seriousness. "Okay, Celine, repeat after me. May I please have a snack?" Briar would coach patiently. "Knack," Celine would respond enthusiastically. "Close enough. Daddy, Celine wants a snack." Celine began crying inconsolably whenever it was time to leave Briar's house. "Briar home?" she would ask every morning, her small face hopeful. "See Briar?" We'll see Briar soon, Nyla would promise, and Celine's face would light up like sunrise breaking over mountains. It was a Thursday evening in late October. The air had that crisp bite that promised winter wasn't far behind. Jackson had made dinner, his attempt at homemade pizza that was slightly lopsided, but made with enough love to compensate for any aesthetic shortcomings. The girls had eaten until their stomachs were full and their faces were covered in sauce, then had run off to play in Briar's room, their laughter echoing through the house like music. Now they were asleep upstairs, tangled together in Briar's bed. Despite Jackson's attempts to settle them separately, he had stopped fighting it weeks ago. "They're going to suffocate each other one of these days," he said, coming back to the porch where Nyla sat wrapped in a blanket. Briar's practically lying on top of her. "It's how they show affection," Nyla managed, though her voice sounded distant even to her own ears. Jackson settled into the chair beside her, then paused. "Hey, you okay? You've been quiet all evening." This was it, the moment she'd been dreading and preparing for in equal measure. Nyla took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. "I need to tell you something," she said. "About Celine." She felt Jackson tense beside her. "Is she okay?" "She's fine. She's perfect. It's just another breath. I haven't been completely honest with you about her, about how she came into my life." The words hung between them like smoke. Nyla couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see his expression change from trust to confusion to betrayal. "Okay," Jackson said carefully. "I'm listening." "Celine isn't," the words stuck in her throat. She forced them out. "She isn't my biological daughter." Silence, long and heavy and suffocating. "I had an older sister," Nyla continued, her voice breaking. "Leora. She was everything I wanted to be, smart and kind and fearless. She married her college sweetheart, his name was Kyle, and they were so happy. The kind of happy that makes you believe in soulmates." She wiped at the tears that had started falling. Kyle was killed in a car accident 3 years ago. Drunk driver. Leora was devastated, but then she found out a few weeks later that she was pregnant. She said it felt like a miracle, like Kale had left her one final gift. Jackson reached for her hand. Neela clung to it like a lifeline. The pregnancy was supposed to be simple. She was healthy. Everything looked normal. But during the delivery, there were complications. She started hemorrhaging and they couldn't. Her voice cracked completely. They couldn't stop it. "Nyla." "She died in my arms," Nyla sobbed. "She was 31 years old and she died holding my hand, begging me to take care of her baby. Her last words were, 'Promise me she'll know she's loved.' And then she was gone. And they put Celine in my arms, this tiny screaming baby who had just lost everything before she even knew what she had. The story poured out of her now, unstoppable. I looked at her, and I knew I would do anything for her. I told everyone she was mine. It was easier than explaining, easier than watching people's faces change from curiosity to pity, easier than reliving the worst day of my life with every new introduction. She turned to face Jackson, her face wet with tears. "I've let them judge me. I've let them call me irresponsible and reckless. I've let men on dates call my daughter a mistake, because as long as they were judging me, they weren't pitying her. As long as they thought I was just some young single mother who got pregnant, they weren't asking questions about dead sisters and tragic births and babies who came into the world through blood and grief." "Nyla," Jackson said again, but she wasn't done. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared. I was so scared that if you knew, you would look at me differently. Or worse, that you would look at her differently. That you would see her as something sad or broken, or less than what she is." "And what is she?" Jackson asked quietly. "Mine?" The word came out fierce and absolute. "She's mine. Not because I gave birth to her, but because I chose her. I choose her every single day. I'm her mother in every way that matters." Silence fell again, and Nyla feared her heart would stop. This was the moment he would pull away, make excuses, disappear from her life like all the others. Instead, Jackson cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "Do you remember what I said the first day we met about Celine?" Nyla shook her head, too overwhelmed to think clearly. "I said she's not a problem. She's a person." His voice was thick with emotion. "That's still true. Whether you gave birth to her or not, you're her mother. You've been her mother every single day for 2 years. You gave up your 20s, your freedom, your peace of mind, so a little girl you loved would never feel alone. You're not angry. Why would I be angry? Because I lied for months." Jackson shook his head. "You didn't lie. You protected her. You protected both of you, and when you trusted me enough, you told me the truth." He pressed his forehead against hers. "That's all I could ask for. That's more than I expected." "But I love you," Jackson interrupted. "Both of you. And nothing you just told me changes that. If anything, it makes me love you more, because I see now how strong you are, how fierce, how much you're willing to sacrifice for the people you love." Nyla broke down completely, sobbing into his shoulder while he held her. She cried for Leora, who would never see her daughter grow up. She cried for Celine, who would one day have to learn the truth about where she came from, and she cried with relief because finally, someone saw her, all of her, and he hadn't run away. "Leora would be proud of you," Jackson whispered into her hair. "She'd be grateful that Celine has a mother who loves her this much, and she'd be happy that you finally let yourself be loved too." They sat like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, and the October chill, and the promise of something new beginning. Inside, 2 little girls slept tangled together like sisters, which was exactly what they had become. Spring arrived in Asheville like a gift. The mountains bloomed with dogwood and rhododendron, and the air smelled like new growth and possibility. Jackson and Nyla were married on a perfect April afternoon in his backyard, surrounded by family and close friends. They had kept it small and intimate, the kind of wedding that felt like a celebration rather than a performance. Briar served as flower girl, scattering petals with the enthusiasm of someone being paid by the petal. She wore a pale pink dress and had insisted on wearing her sneakers underneath, because princesses should be practical. Celine served as ring bearer, though the term was generous. She was more interested in eating the ribbons on the ring pillow than actually delivering said rings. At 3 years old, she had strong opinions about everything, and pretty bows were apparently meant for consumption. Celine? No, Nyla had whispered during the ceremony, gently removing a ribbon from her daughter's mouth. "We don't eat the decorations." "Why not?" Celine asked, genuinely confused. The guests had laughed. Nyla had cried happy tears. When it was time for vows, Jackson looked at Nyla with the kind of love that made everyone present feel like they were intruding on something sacred. "I promise to love you," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "And I promise to love our daughters, all of them, exactly as they are, for every day of my life. I promise to be patient when the mornings are chaos and the nights are long. I promise to see you, really see you, even when you're trying to hide. And I promise that our family, this beautiful, unexpected, perfectly imperfect family, will always be my first priority." "That means he loves you forever and ever," Briar whispered loudly to Celine. "Forever," Celine repeated solemnly, as if filing away this important information. Nyla's vows were shorter, her voice breaking on every other word. "You saw me," she managed, looking at Jackson through tears. "On the hardest day, in the scariest moment, you saw me and you stayed. You didn't run from my chaos or my secrets or my complicated, messy life. You just stayed." She took a shaky breath. "I promise to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that. I promise to love your daughter like my own, because she already feels like my own. And I promise to keep choosing us every single day, even when it's hard." "Mama pretty," Celine announced loudly, pointing at Nyla's dress. "Like princess." More laughter, more tears. That night, after the guests had gone and the girls were finally asleep, Jackson and Nyla sat on the porch once more, their porch now because this was their house, their family, their life. "Do you think Leora would approve?" Nyla asked quietly, a question that still haunted her in vulnerable moments. Jackson pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I think she'd be proud of you. I think she'd be grateful that Celine has a mother who loves her this much. And I think she'd be happy that you finally let yourself be loved too." "I wish she could meet you," Nyla whispered. "I wish she could see what we built, what Celine has." "I wish I could have known her," Jackson agreed. "But in a way I do. She's in Celine's laugh, in her stubborn streak, in the way she loves with her whole heart." He paused. "And she's in you, in the way you love fiercely and protect the people you care about. That's your sister's legacy, not just Celine, but the way you chose to honor her memory by becoming the mother she couldn't be." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the night sounds of their neighborhood. Somewhere inside, Briar was probably having one of her epic dreams about being a superhero. Celine was probably sleeping sprawled across the entire bed, taking up far more space than should be physically possible for someone so small. In the morning, Celine would wake first, as she always did. She would crawl into Briar's bed and whisper with all the subtlety of a foghorn, "Wake up, Briar, wake up, it's morning time." Briar would groan dramatically and pull her sister under the covers for a tickle attack that would end with both of them shrieking with laughter. Jackson would make his famous pancakes, slightly burnt on the edges but made with enough love to compensate, while Nyla refereed the chaos of two small girls arguing over who got the purple cup. "It's my turn for purple," Briar would insist. "My purple," Celine would counter, clutching the cup to her chest with the ferocity of a tiny dragon protecting its hoard. Jackson would solve the problem by producing a second purple cup he had bought specifically for this purpose, because he was a father who planned ahead. Later, they would go to the park. Briar would push Celine on the swings, standing on her tiptoes to reach high enough, her face serious, with concentration. "Higher, Briar, higher," Celine would demand, fearless in the way that only 3-year-olds protected by loving big sisters could be. Jackson and Nyla would watch from a bench, their hands intertwined. "We did okay," Jackson would say, "didn't we?" "Better than okay," Nyla would agree. "We did something impossible. We made a family out of broken pieces." In the afternoon, they would stop by the cemetery. It was something Nyla did once a month, bringing fresh flowers to Leora's grave, sitting on the grass beside it, talking to her sister about everything and nothing. Celine said, "I love you," without being prompted yesterday, and she's starting preschool in the fall. "She's so smart, Leora, so funny and kind and stubborn, just like you." A pause. "I'm married now, to an incredible man who loves her like his own. Briar is her sister in every way that matters. I kept my promise. She knows she's loved." Sometimes Briar would come with them, placing her own flowers beside Nyla's. "Hi, Aunt Leora," she would say to the stone. "I'm taking very good care of Celine. She's my favorite person ever, except maybe Daddy and Nyla, but she's in the top 3 for sure." And once, just once, Celine had asked, "Mama, who's this?" Nyla had taken a breath, knowing this conversation would come eventually, but still unprepared for it. "This is your Aunt Leora. She loved you very much. She wanted to be your mama, but she couldn't, so she asked me to be your mama instead. Where is she?" "She's in heaven, baby, watching over you." Celine had thought about this, with the seriousness of a tiny philosopher. Then she had placed her small hand on the headstone and said, "Thank you, Aunt Leora, for giving me mama." Nyla had cried. Even now, months later, the memory made her eyes sting. But for now, on their wedding night, she simply sat with her husband on their porch and breathed. She had kept her promise to Leora. She had given Celine a family, Not the one they had planned, but the one they needed. She had let herself be loved, even when it was terrifying. And somewhere, Nyla hoped, Leora was smiling.